created an FTX account, ran it up, blew it up.
Now, Eclipse is a SVM, right? Why? How is it different from EVMs?
EVM is a single lane road which has like a 30 km per hour speed limit. Like regardless if you're a Ferrari, a Lamborghini, or like a farm tractor, like everyone just has to drive at basically the same speed.
You guys created a game, right? Moo Games, Devil Rug. What's that?
So like this Moo Games is meant to be like a tournament. People basically paid $50 to mint this Turbo Pass. The first place won, I think, 225,000. The second place won 112,000. The third place won 45,000.
Hey, so Ren, tell us about yourself. What do you do? Why are you here? Why are you in crypto? And how's your journey been like?
Damn, starting off strong. But first of all, thank you so much for having me on. Let me start from the start then. Got into crypto around April 2021. Like most people, had a friend going, "Ren, you should trade crypto." I was like, okay, sure. Created an FTX account, ran it up, blew it up. At some point, I was like, I feel like I should go understand what I'm trading. Read the Bitcoin white paper like everyone else. That wasn't the aha moment for me, to be honest. The aha moment for me was definitely more so DeFi. I read about flash loans, and that was like my red pill moment. I was like, holy shit, this is an entirely new primitive that's just not possible in like existing TradFi systems, right? So I was like, okay, I'm set. I want to work in this industry. Got my first job as a trader at like a crypto hedge fund, just running on-chain yield farming strategies, market neutral and market long. Did that for a bit. At some point, I was like, okay, maybe I'm not so good at this like whole trading thing. I'm not really sure like why I did that, to be honest. So I took a research job. I wanted to be more on the ground. I wanted to understand like what was happening. I wanted to sort of like understand the state of the market, new interesting apps, protocols. So I worked at Blockworks Research for 1.5 years. Super fun job. Loved it. Great team. Everyone is a chat there. Basically got to dive into like a nerdy topic of choice every single month. MEV, DPIN, L2 infrastructure, cross-chain messaging, oracles, like anything really. And then did that for a bit. And then at some point I was like, okay, like writing research is great. I love it. Like I really like getting to be a nerd, but I also don't want to be writing research reports forever and just like making liquid hedge funds money. So I was like, I want to be more on the ground. I want to go build something again. I did a startup during university for 2 years. I wanted to go join like a startup again. And so kind of looked at like what was out there, right? I wanted to join something that was an order of magnitude like improvement over the existing landscape, especially like if you looked at the EVM and EVM L2 landscape, like everything was like 15 TPS. Base hadn't even started scaling. It was very clear that DA would not be a bottleneck anymore after Celestia and Eigen DA and like EIP 4844. And the next innovation will come from the execution layer, right? And always been like sort of like a little bit of a Solana maxi when I was at Blockworks Research, always being an EVM L2 hater. Like every month I would go like, how is this thing still doing 15 TPS? Uh, so that was one reason. The second reason was because joining a startup like Eclipse allowed me to do like a lot of different things. Like if you go join a perp dex, you're probably just selling to LPs or selling to traders. Like a perp dex can only be so much. Whereas if I join Eclipse, I get to do so many things. I get to work with ecosystem projects. I get to think about like chain level products. I get to talk to like new up and coming developers. It's really a multifaceted job, which I really enjoy, to be honest. And so, yeah, that's kind of how I ended up where I am today. I realized I haven't done the intro yet. I'm Ren. I currently lead ecosystem at Eclipse. But yeah, I get to work with amazing ecosystem teams. I get to talk to builders from all of the stages, from super early stage to like the later stage, like more mature builder. And I've always said like my North Star is like app success on Eclipse, right? Because without applications, there are no users. Without any users, like your block space is pretty useless. So yeah, I like to think of my goal as like getting as many apps, the strongest product market fit as possible on Eclipse.
Whoa, man, wait. So there is like so much to unpack here. So you went from like a trader to then like so many job shifts, and then you're finally like a growth marketer at Eclipse, right? Then you were like
Yeah.
writing research, you were like doing like DeFi yield farming strategies, right? At, at your job before your research
Yep.
job, and then you are
Yep.
now a marketer, man. I have so many questions right now, but let's just take a step back. Let's take a step back and let's try to
Yep.
understand like because for me, right, you are like how long have you been in crypto, by the way?
Almost 4 years
four
at this
years
point. I started working in crypto while I was also in like university, so
Mhm,
like there was a bit of like an overlap there. I basically started working full time before I graduated.
mhm, mhm. So your aha moment was like DeFi when you sort of saw like, hey, we can make like crazy yields from all these stuff. For me, like it's mostly been like asset formation, like the ability to
Hmm.
like create assets out of thin air and then ride the thing. And I'm mostly a trader, high volume trader, stuff like that. Now, Eclipse is a SVM, right? Why? How is it different from EVMs? And why you're so bullish on it?
Yeah. So the SVM stands for Solana Virtual Machine. Most people are familiar with EVM, which stands for Ethereum Virtual Machine. The EVM is pretty constrained, either because it was just fundamentally like built earlier, so there's a lot of tech debt, or just because of like conscious design decisions, right? The two fundamental differences between the EVM and the SVM is that the SVM has A, local fee markets, and B, parallel execution, right? And both of those things are part of the reason why Solana has scaled so much better in terms of throughput than Ethereum and EVM L2s today. So they give like a layman analogy, right? The EVM is a single lane road which has like a 30 km per hour speed limit. Like regardless if you're a Ferrari, a Lamborghini, or like a farm tractor, like everyone just has to drive at basically the same speed, and it's fundamentally very constrained in terms of how many cars can like pass through that road at any given moment in time, right? Solana basically went, okay, like I don't want to build this like one lane road. I'm gonna build like a 4 lane highway, right? But also, so that's like the parallel execution component, right? Solana has like 4 threads, and transactions get like scheduled into these 4 threads. But also because of these local free markets and how these transactions are sort of split into threads, where one account can take up more than 25% of compute units, which is basically like block space or gas in Ethereum land. You basically get the scenario, right, where like if you want to go fast, like you can go fast. If you are a really like popular like program or account, like an NFT mint, or like a very popular meme coin, like you kind of have to like queue with everyone else, right? So like all of the tractors will drive in one lane, all of the sports cars will drive in one lane, all of the family sedans will drive in one lane, and all of the motorcycles will drive in one lane across this like 4 lane Solana highway, right? With that, you basically get a few things. The first is that even if there's some crazy event happening on the chain, like a very popular NFT mint, or like Trump just launched his meme coin, as a normal app, your fees won't be impacted. Whereas on the EVM chain, you've seen so many times just because the NFT mint is happening, the average gas price of a transaction has gone up by like 10x, 100x. Like anytime an airdrop happens on Arbitrum, the gas price goes to like $1 average, right? Which is just like crazy to think of that someone else's business can affect your business just because theirs is doing well. It almost sucks. Like it's really in your face. Like they're both doing well, and because they're doing well, your business gets impacted. So we were like, okay, the SVM is the most performant execution environment today. Why not just bring that to Ethereum? You know, it just made so much sense. From a architectural perspective, we use Celestia for DA, and that allows us to have incredibly cheap like data posting fees and also insanely high like throughput. And that is like the kind of the whole reason why we like made Eclipse what it is today. Solana on Ethereum and SVM L2.
Uh, Actually, I wrote a tweet about it, exactly the thing that you're saying right now. And I think it was like 3 4 months ago. I'll just sort of read the tweet. I was talking about EVM and how EVM just did not like there were like some architectural problems with it. So it goes like this. I think the problem is largely architectural. It can never accommodate
Hmm.
the high TPS that will be required, especially from the like incoming autonomous worlds. We are innovating on everything around the EVM, but the VM itself. So for what, like for like MetaMask or Uniswap, or for the things that EVM has, right? Dexes. So basically, we are building stuff from like the tech perspective and not the user perspective. And
Yeah.
eventually we'll have to come up with like app specific rollups, or so the thing is we are building for like backwards compatibility rather than like
Yeah.
you know uh, building better tech. And I think SVM sort of mixes the things, right? Kind of like that. That's good, right? And I think what you're building, I was like playing around with Eclipse. What you're building is pretty dope. And you're a marketer, right? And I could see like the passion with which you were talking about Eclipse. But the thing is, even if you make the greatest of tech, right? Even if your product is the strongest, right? If you don't have users, it's just
Yep.
not going to work out, right? And I for a long time I used to think that, hey, if you build a good enough product, users will come eventually. And that is true for like incentive based models. But if incentives run out, like you'll just it'll be a ghost town, right? For example, Blast, uh, and every other EVM L2 that we see. So I want to talk about like more about how the user perspective or the user acquisition part. Like, how are you thinking about acquiring users for Eclipse? Who are your target users, and sort of how you're thinking about it? That's like my next question that I'd like to ask.
Yeah. Got it. You know, there isn't really this notion of target users for Eclipse. That's almost thinking of it the wrong way. It's more so who are the target users of the apps on Eclipse, right? Because apps are like kind of the customers of a chain, and these apps are the things that the users use. Barring if you're a payments chain. Like Tron doesn't have apps. Tron just has like users that literally just use the chain for payments. In that case, their users are people in, for example, like countries with high remittance costs, no like financial banking or payments infrastructure. Like that's a different example. But for Eclipse, the users use the apps on the chain. So the question is more so like, what type of apps are interesting on Eclipse, right? And then assuming these apps are interesting enough, how can we get them the most user demand and users as fast as possible, right? So if you look at the Eclipse ecosystem today, it's probably a good mix of DeFi and gaming. Probably 70% DeFi, 30% gaming. But the name of the game has always been drive these like really differentiated, valuable, novel experiences that people want to use, right? Like obviously everyone knows that crypto users today, especially the very crypto native ones, are incentive driven and very like financial opportunity driven. We're not going to pretend we're not very aware of that fact, right? So obviously that's come into consideration in some of the ways like we've executed like ecosystem growth, user growth, just to bootstrap the community and like the sort of like the user demand. But long term, the way we're thinking about it is, okay, you need to build this like really interesting ecosystem that has things that other chains don't have. And like that will be the onboarding reason for people to come on your chain. And then B, you need to build this incredibly smooth onboarding experience, whether that's like a global wallet, mobile UX, easy on ramping and off ramping options. That's the second thing. And then the third, while you're doing all of that, try to build up some mode of like network effects to it, whether that's liquidity network effects, user network effects, or sort of like app composability network effects. In general, that's how we've thought about ecosystem today. So far, a lot of the teams that have been built on Eclipse in the early days, it was very much so like, hey, you are a Solana project. You are a project that's building on the SVM. There's this whole world of users that use your app on Solana, but there's also a whole world of users that don't want to hold don't want to hold assets on Solana, and instead they want to hold ETH, but they still want to do stuff with like Solana DeFi, right? And Eclipse is basically that option. If you have a fantastic Solana DeFi product, which I think Solana does have the best DeFi products today, you can bring that to Eclipse with like minimal headaches in terms of like deploying your contract over. And now there's a whole world of users in Ethereum land that hold ETH, like Ethereum and its L2s, that you can sort of like open up a new market opportunity to, right? And so instead of constraining yourself to this like settled environment, you have just increased your total market opportunity. And this applies for both like projects that are blue chip, have completely saturated the vertical on Solana, or smaller projects, that are new, up and coming, perhaps want a playing field that's less competitive. That also is like a net new like user base and audience.
Man, you have thought about it so much. I feel like a fucking idiot right now. Wait. So,
No,
so,
no.
so lot to unpack here, right? So I'll sort of re-summarize everyone like what he has said till now, from the beginning, right? So basically, what Eclipse is like a SVM layer, right? So essentially, think of it as like uh, Ethereum, like Ethereum compatibility with Solana low fees and transaction speeds, right? Think of it like that. And what he's trying to do is like bridge the uh, gap, right? And the way sort of he's thinking about marketing and like acquiring users is like getting enough good apps onto Eclipse that people are uh, people join just to use those apps, right? And he also wants to create like a pretty smooth onboarding experience, because a lot of times I read this report, right, where like if you have like sign-ups on your app versus wallets, so if you want to sign up to a website, um, people tend to trust sign-ups more rather than just connecting their wallets, right? So he probably wants to do like a smooth onboarding experience. I'm not sure how they're planning to do that, but that's the plan, right? And third would be like people who want more Solana DeFi exposure on Ethereum, and Solana guys who want more Ethereum exposure, right? That's the whole. Did I get the gist of it correct? Right?
Yeah, in
Yeah.
general.
In
Yeah.
in general,
One
in
one
general.
thing to note is that we are not Ethereum compatible in the sense that like when most people say Ethereum compatible, they'll think like EVM compatible. So I can
Mhm.
take my Solidity contract
Mhm.
and deploy it. Eclipse is SVM, which means the developer environment is the same as Solana. So you can't just take your Solidity contract from an EVM chain and deploy it on Eclipse. But in terms of Ethereum compatible as like an Ethereum rollup, yeah, that's Ethereum compatible in that sense.
All right, I get it. Okay. Now I also sort of saw that you guys like created a game, right? Moo Games, Devil Rug. What's that? What's that? What were you thinking about it? And just first explain what is that and what was the whole strategy behind it.
Yeah, so Moo Games is like this on-chain version of like Squid Games almost. We partnered with RecTech to sort of build out the Moo Games. The whole idea was to have this really fun onboarding event that people could take part in. People basically paid $50 to mint this turbo pass. This turbo pass allowed them to enter the game and play it. And then all of those like minting proceeds for the pass went to this prize pool, right? So we just paid out the prizes over the weekend. The first place won, I think, 225,000. The second place won 112,000. The third place won 45,000, and there was like a whole bunch of other different prizes, right? The goal for us, especially with movie games, was to build this like fun experience, right? I think that's one thing that we've demonstrated that we're not bad at. Just like having these like really fun, novel experiences on the chain. And the Moo Games was just like another example of that. It was just purely meant to be this like fun event for both existing community members and new users, that were perhaps interested in Eclipse.
All right, makes sense. And what about Devil Rug? So Devil Rug was, I think, a part of Moo Games. It ran for
Yeah,
like 24 hours, right?
24 hours.
And
Yeah.
yeah, so why only 24 hours? Why not like just keep the game there, right? What was that?
So like this Moo Games is meant to be like a tournament,
Mhm.
right? Like
Mhm.
there's meant to be a winner at the end of it.
Mhm.
We didn't want to keep it open for that long, just because at some points it gets like boring, and it needs to end at some point. Therefore, Rug is probably like a game that can also be a standalone game. It's
Mhm.
functionally quite similar to a lot of the Crash games if you're familiar with like different crypto casinos.
Correct.
So I think it is still interesting as like a standalone app. We just wanted to make it as part of this like entire experience, right? Because if
Mhm.
you like played in the Moo Games, you would know that like the entire experience was a very social one. You know, it was really chaotic. People on the Discord, especially the second and third game, Average Minds and Groupthink, like everyone was trying to play mind games with each other. People were going hysteric over like the Devil Rug game and trying to see who would like basically have larger balls and like hold the trade for longer and get like a higher return. Um, so yeah, that was kind of like the thought rationale behind like some of the decisions, especially like why only for 24 hours.
I just want to talk about like airdrop strategies with you, like how you're thinking about airdrop, because we don't want to attract farmers to our platform. We want like real users with either deep liquidity or people who are at least going to stick to the platform.
Yeah.
And also after the TG, how are we going to make sure that token remains in like in a decent price action, right? So
Yeah.
so first, airdrop strategies, like what kind of airdrop strategies are you looking at? How are you thinking about airdrops? What airdrops do you think you would simulate, or who has done a good airdrop in the past that you like really admire? All your thoughts on that.
Yeah. So obvious disclaimer before I start talking, none of this is in the context of Eclipse, just
Correct.
general thoughts. First of all, like farmers, I think they almost get a bad rep because farmers are also the people that are willing to try like new things, right? Also, farmers are incredibly speculative liquidity, which at the end of the day is kind of like 99% of crypto today. Like 99% of people that hold assets is just speculative liquidity. Like people just want to make money. There's nothing wrong with that. Crypto is the best rails for that, bar none. Uh, so that's the first thing, right? The second thing is retaining users like post an airdrop, right? There's like 10 million ways you can do it, like how much you airdrop, how you do it, who you give it to. I think in the past we've seen some protocols like over index to airdrop farmers and basically like make it like very sibillable, which is not good, I think, because everyone knows that there are these like massive airdrop farms in, I don't know, like whatever country um in Asia that basically like their entire job is just to like be on like 1,000 PCs or phones and just farm these protocols, right? So that's like something that I think that crypto has not done well in the past year. Hyperliquid is obviously the best example of an airdrop. Prices just
Hmm.
gone up day
Yeah.
after day,
Yeah.
or at least like up until a certain point post the airdrop. Hard to say what that's a function of. It's probably attributable to the fact that it's a fantastic product and the fact that they had like no VC involvement. They built up like this great product, this great like narrative. So they did a lot of things well. Retaining users post airdrop, I think it's not that complicated, to be honest. Like obviously on the surface, it's easy for me to say, but I think it's a function of two things, right? The first is community. Does your core community truly believe in like what you're building for the long term? That's the first component. Do they actually feel like they're at home? Do they actually feel like they're part of something meaningful? Because that is still a very important factor in crypto. As weird as I think it is, like it's still a thing in crypto, right? The second thing is like, does your chain just have interesting things to do? Like I thought Blast would work out fantastically, to be honest. I think a lot of people did. But I think at the end of the day, like maybe there just weren't as many interesting things for people to do as people thought. So be like you need to give a reason for people to continue to hold assets on your chain, right? That's another reason. So there must be fundamentally interesting things for people to do. The third thing is just increasing asset demand, right? Like one of the partial reasons why so does so well is because every pump fund token, every like form of trading behavior on Solana is denominated in SOL. So people continue to need to hold SOL or buy SOL for a reason, right? And so as you increase the asset demand, as you increase the need or willingness to like buy or hold that token, that naturally like helps elevate the token price. So once again, like none of this is in the context of Eclipse. I think those are just some things that like protocols should be cognizant of, but there's definitely no one size fits all solution. Every protocol is different. Even like infra protocols, which we would fall under, like everyone needs to have a different playbook that matches, the state of your community, the state of your ecosystem, the state of like your traction and product market fit. But those are just some general thoughts I think around TGEs and like airdrops.
So
Sure.
first is like community. And I'm like a meme coin trader,
Yeah.
NFT trader, flipper, right? And so the way I think about it is like communities, except like for a very very few, communities aren't real. And from what I feel, to be honest, right? Because
Yeah.
I'm in so many Discord chats. At some point in time,
Yeah.
it's all the same, right? And
Yeah.
specifically like NFTs, like they are meant to be like, they are like a form of community. They were created to be a community, right? For Eclipse, you have a real product, you have real users, real value accrual, right? And what I've seen over time is like, uh, as soon as your like community is equivalent to your token price. So if your token price is going up, you have like a great community, and if it's going down, like
Yeah.
it goes down. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's what I've seen. And if you can just gauge that along with Bitcoin price, that hey, if the price is going up and the community is good, just buy the token, it goes up. Like that's the whole playbook, at least, right? So
Yeah.
how do you plan to build like a real community around Eclipse, right? That's what I'm trying to understand. uh,
Yeah.
how do you do that? Are you going to launch an NFT collection or something like that, or what's the incentive structure, or like how is community going to be a part of Eclipse?
Yeah, I'll answer this by saying something else first, right? Like I think you brought up a very interesting point. Like I've always personally thought about this a lot. Like community is this really, really interesting concept that's very, very native to crypto, right? And even in crypto, it has this like really weird dynamics. If you look at Solana, you know, no one will ever say Solana has the best retail community in a sense of like the traditional definition of community in crypto. Solana doesn't have a Discord where all of Solana users go ham. Solana doesn't have like a Telegram where all of the Solana people like talk to each other, right? Like zero community in the traditional sense of like crypto community. But they are one of the most successful chains today. Probably same with Hyperliquid. Hyperliquid probably doesn't have like a Discord where people like do community things in the traditional sense of community, but they are like a hugely successful product, both like the product itself and like the token price. And so I've always thought that was like a very interesting dynamic, right? If you look at community and what type of community Solana does have an insane developer community that is probably the best in crypto today. Built up by Super Team, the Solana Foundation. Like I don't think anyone can compete with
Yeah.
the way like Solana has built developer community the way it has till date. Maybe someone comes along and has a entirely crazy playbook that they can execute on in the future, but TBD. And then if you go look at like Web 2, right? Like all of the most successful companies on earth, like there's no community. Like imagine going to like Instagram, Snapchat, Google, Nvidia and saying like, hey, have you guys thought about like building up your community? They'll be like, "What the fuck? What do you mean? Like, what a community? I just get people to use my product. I make money. Then like my share price goes up." Um, so I've always thought community is this fascinating concept in crypto. To answer your question, how to build a community in crypto, it's mostly about building trust, right? Social capital is one thing that you can't really take shortcuts on. Financial capital in terms of like having financial incentive, financial opportunity, having people rally around price action, like that's relatively easy to build upon. But like building trust takes time. Um, and being genuine also takes time. There are a million different ways to build trust quickly, but at a kind of superficial level. But there are very few ways to build genuine trust in a thoughtful manner that occurs over time. So a few things that we've done at Eclipse for very specific reasons, like we've aggressively stamped out like sort of like airdrop farmer behavior. Not like speculative users who just, have speculative capital, but people who are very, very obviously here for the wrong reasons, just want to extract from the community and they're like whiny, they're like very demanding, they're just like net negative on the community as a whole. And the second is like, can we build an environment that is just fun outside of the product, right? Like because Eclipse, like the blockchain itself is a product, from Eclipse's perspective. But can you build a community that's almost like orthogonal to the product, and it's interesting in and of itself? So if you look at our community today, like people have their own game nights, people host like karaoke sessions. I think it's pretty fair to say that there's almost zero incentive to do so. Almost, I obviously get that people will always be farming for like Discord roles, whatever. But from my perspective, there's not as strong of like a financial incentive. So I'm a lot more comfortable saying that I think Eclipse has like a more genuine community than perhaps like some others. Is that a function of the fact that like we don't have a token yet? Hard to say. I think it's entirely possible for a lot of these ecosystems to have the best community in the world until the token launches, everyone gets their money, and then
Mhm.
ta-da, your community like disappears overnight. Like
Mhm.
I'm not gonna pretend that I'm not like cognizant and aware of that possibility. So our goal is ultimately, like build the best ecosystem possible while we're building the best ecosystem possible. So people actually have a reason to, stay on the chain, use the things that they do. Like build up this community culture, this sense of belonging, right? Because if you looked at the way like the Eclipse community is by far not the largest today, like we aren't gonna be like these like cult like community chains, whether that's like a bear chain, like very cult like, or sort of like a monad, like they've been termed like the community chain has the craziest community. Like we're not gonna beat them in raw numbers. I don't think that's something that we'll do anytime soon, transparently. And that's also not something I want to compete on, right? I'd much rather have this like very tight knit chain where there's a core set of believers. Like people in the Eclipse community, they're pretty I don't want to say like toxic, right? But they're like very strong believers in like what we're trying to do. And that's good. Even if they're not the largest group. And then if we just look at the way that they like build together with like the ecosystem projects, the builders, the developers, it's a very good sign of like what's happening, right? Everyone basically supports these early projects. There's almost this like everyone's rowing the same direction vision. Um, so we've made some conscious choices in like how to build up the community, right? The first thing is just like it's been like 2 years of like just straight up like talking to everyone in Discord on like a day-to-day basis, making time for everyone. I think that's like one of the key components, right? Like as these projects grow, a lot of the time you lose time. Like you just don't have enough time to like just talk to everyone, interact with everyone. But that's something like, all of us, if we just look at all of our Twitter accounts, we just interact with community members like the entire day, right? So that's something that we're not gonna lose anytime soon. That's one component. The second thing is just, as I mentioned just now, like just making people feel like you care. Like sometimes that's all they want, like because like everyone's very jaded. There's been like a few bad airdrops where users feel like they got farmed. So even just like making community feel like you genuinely care, which we do, goes a long way in crypto today, right? And it kind of goes back to that whole like social capital idea I was talking about, like this idea of trust, social capital. Can you build like genuine relationships? Sure, some of that will disappear over time. Sure, some of that will disappear as we nuke into the bear market. Sure, some of that would disappear if we, for example, like eventually launch a token and do an airdrop. But our goal is to do the best job that we can, build the most sort of like tight knit and trustworthy and genuine community that we can, and just see how that plays out.
Right. I think I agree with everything that you've said, and I'd like to add a few more things, right? Because I've not built a community ever, right? But I have been in a lot of communities, and
Yeah,
I have been like a part of all of these communities. And the thing is, if I think about it, right, you have like 24 hours in a day, and you can only like spend like a finite amount of time in any community, right? And what I've enjoyed the most in, like, for example, I'm a part of the Pudgy Penguins community, right?
yeah,
And because the thing is, the social capital that you get just by being a part of the community is insane, right? Even if the token is down 75%, like the people are like bull posting Pengu all over the timeline, and you are in the Discord,
yeah, yeah,
everybody's like hyping it up, like, hey, ETFs is coming, us shit like that. And the point that I'm trying to say is the only people who sell are the people who don't know how to market, and the only people who market are the people who don't know how to build, right? And I think if you build a good enough product and you're like, hey, this is like the best fucking product that there is, people are going to stay. Like that's the thing. And if you care about them, you're like genuinely responsive to their questions, to the feedback, and listen to them. I think you do form like semi-cultish community, and especially with Bira chain, right? I was like, I was speaking with the like one of the biggest like one of the biggest creators on Bira, and he was bullish. This was pre TG Vira, and we were talking about the entire hyponomics of Vira. If you don't, I'm not sure if you know the tokenomics of Vira, but it's very hypey, and it's a very Ponzi like structure. I was like, dude, what the fuck is this? And he sort of tried to explain it to me, and I was like, okay, I get it. And Vira is down, the community sentiment is down like all time. But still, like, there are core believers in the Vira chain who are still like persisting. So I get what you're saying from that point in time. So community totally agree. My next question would be about like asset demand, right? So there are sort of like two parts of it, right? So the supply side and the demand side. So let's say if you have enough token sinks for Eclipse, right? And let's say if you have enough demand from somewhere, the token price will go up. So our goal, let's say hypothetically, is to create a asset which goes up indefinitely, right? So let's just give that as a caveat, right? So we need like token sinks, and we need so we need to sort out both the supply and the demand side. So let's first talk about demand. Like, how would your token generate demand in Eclipse?
Yeah, so if you look at most like L1s and L2s today, right, there's kind of like two functions of that. The first is like utility value from, say, like governance. Like, that's one way of like holding demand. The second is like financial value, right? Whether you have a fee switch on your token, whether you have like economic activity that's denominated in your token. I would say the second one is a much more like valuable proposition to users, right? Like, ideally, the amount of asset demand for the token is positively correlated with the amount of asset demand, with the amount of economic value, right? Because there are a lot of scenarios where like economic value is not directly translated into asset demand for a token, and that's basically like not what you want, right? Because this chain is doing fantastically, economic activity is popping off, meme coin trading volume, DEX volume, whatever, like MEV tips, like all of that's popping up. But like, if that's not translating to asset demand for like your chain token, then you've kind of cucked yourself. So like, if you look at some of the L2s today, right, they have like these tokens. They represent like ownership over the DAO treasury. There's some governance or utility value. I don't think the correlation between economic activity and the asset demand is as high as people would like to be. But that's also hard, right? Like, imagine if Arbitrum like tried to force economic activity to be denominated in ARB, like say meme coin activity, right? Like, that's not something you can just like snap your fingers and do. There's a reason why like so much economic activity on Ethereum and Ethereum L2s has been denominated in ETH or like even like USDC, right? So that's something that we're cognizant of. That's something that most ecosystems should be cognizant of. But yes, obviously, the goal is to have the highest amount of asset demand as possible while minimizing the supply as much as possible. Obviously, the supply side, like, you can't change once you announce your tokenomics. Like, it's kind of it. There's some like interesting things that you can do. But yeah, so like it's much better to focus on the demand side of things. And yeah, like utility value, economic activity value, most of the time that means like either the asset is productive, you can get something off of it, or like economic value is denominated in it, is how I would think about like asset demand.
Makes sense. So basically, you can't, like, I understand that, but have you ever, like, do you know about the tokenomics of Olympus DAO? It was like it was the last bull.
Yeah.
So are you planning something crazy like that? Like, do you think something like that works? Like, very jittery, like complicated tokenomics, and way to
I
sort
think
of
you would have to
bond it,
be
stake it. Yeah.
mentally insane
Yeah.
to make a change token the same as Olympus now. That like also these Ponzi's, right?
Yeah.
Like, they really only work once unless you have net new participants, because everyone knows the game already, so you can't play the same game, right? But yeah, like, definitely too crazy for like a networks token. Like, you can't do like, I don't even know how that would work. Like,
no, I'm not talking about like I'm not talking about like you taking the Olympus DAO thing, but it was a very new sort of Ponzi when it came out. Yeah, are you thinking of something like that? where you have like a crazy bonding process or a staking process, and you're like, hey, that's how you. Are you thinking of that strategy somewhere, or not, or just like
I think in general, not like with respect to Eclipse, like there are a lot of interesting like mechanism designs that chains could make, especially L2s. When it comes to like where and how the token is used. Just because if you look at it today, like it's not really used anywhere. You know, it's just like people hold on to it. There's governance value. It represents ownership over the DAO treasury. That's it. But I think the design space is still like pretty wide open for like interesting ways to integrate like a network's token into like the core mechanisms of like the chain itself.
makes sense, makes sense. Also, like, how do you think about VCs? Because in like crypto right now, VCs is like the hated term, right? But people don't really realize like you need money to build shit, right? And people are like incognizant of the fact, and anything with VC they don't touch, and especially with like if they have like a short vesting schedule, or if they have like heavy
Yeah.
bags in, they're like, hey, because even with Solana, right? Because of the sell pressure that we have right now is purely because we are going to have like massive unlocks in March, I think. So I just wanted to understand, like, how do you think about that? Like, did you think about it in terms of tokenomics, or you're like, do we have a way to prevent the VC sell off or something like that?
I think it's a few things. Like first is regulatory environment, right? Like if people could raise from non VCs, you know, like non accredited investors, like they probably would have to some extent, you know, just because you get community buy. Like VCs are not the end users of your chain, you know.
Correct.
um, like actual people, normal users, normal crypto native degens, like they're the users of your chain. So you might as well make them as economically aligned as early on as possible, right? So they have the most upside as possible. I think that's one thing. The second is like, sure, VCs get a bad rep, but it's also this very interesting dichotomy, right? Like retail shits on VCs, and simultaneously, like you see all of these like airdrop farmers, they write threads like, "Oh, this VC has invested this amount in this chain, and
Yeah.
this is why this chain should launch at this valuation," right?
Right.
So it's like
Right.
you're hitting on VCs at the same time, and then like simultaneously you're going like, "Okay, this is the reason. Like this VC is the reason that this chain should launch at this valuation," like, which never really made sense to me.
Yeah.
And I do think there's still like some amount of signal, right?
Mhm.
Like maybe not the perfect signal, but like say if like a tier one VC invested in this chain, it was a huge round. There's a lot of like interested capital. VCs are willing to invest in ecosystem apps on this chain.
Mhm.
Then like to you as a builder, that's like a partial signal, right? Like that's probably more interesting than a chain that has zero VC interest. No one cares about it, and no one's willing to like invest in apps that are building on it, right? So I think VCs, they get a bad rep. I don't know what it's because of like regulatory environment, how the market structure is, or just like the wrong incentive structures. But like, if you look at Web 2, right? Like, if VCs didn't exist, oh my god,
Yeah.
we would have like
Nothing.
nothing.
Yeah.
No Uber, no Facebook, no Google, no Airbnb. You know,
Yeah.
if community rounds existed in Web 2, would all of these apps have existed? I don't know. You could make an argument that the average human being is probably not as good as a investor as a quote unquote sophisticated VC. And I think that's true. You know, a VC probably does have a better view of the market, a better view of trends, where technology is headed in general, and so they can make better investment decisions that gives the correct amount of capital to the correct people that are going to have a big impact on the future. The same is probably true in crypto too. But I think community just wants upside, you know. They're sick of buying tokens that launch at like ridiculous valuations. The price goes down 80% over the next 4 years as like unlocks come in. And one way of getting people like more upside is by getting them in earlier. Because then their cost basis is lower, right? It's nothing crazy. It's just like simple math. I think that's probably like the primary like sort of like frustration around the VC structure.
Correct.
Like VCs get out of these like low valuations. I'm forced to buy this token at the top. Why? It's unfair.
Yeah. So you're planning to like have like people at pre-sales, like at lower cost valuations, or like how do you plan to solve this? This is a problem, right? Like
Yeah, I mean, like Eclipse's funding history is
Mhm.
out there with raised
Yeah.
primarily from VCs. You know, a simple Google search would tell
Yeah.
you
Correct.
how much we've
Yeah.
raised from like what VCs.
Correct.
I think the way to think about us is like how can we get both like community alignment and community buy-in, right? Obviously there's like a financial component to that, but there's also like a non-financial component to that. There's
Correct.
almost this like social component, right? And I think that's a front that like we can innovate on. I can't like undo our VC fundraisers, you know.
Right.
I'm not the CEO of
Right.
Eclipse.
Right.
Even if I wanted to, like, you know, what's done is done. But there are ways to get people to get buy-in, both to Eclipse and to the ecosystem, right? The ecosystem is still very early, it's still very young. Chances are a lot of these ecosystem apps will launch their own tokens, and that is something that you can get upside on. You know, it maybe if anything, like that's a better investment to make than like Eclipse as a whole. If you're like really bullish on like a certain app in Eclipse, like that probably has higher upside, right? So it's something that like we're thinking about. It's something that we're cognizant of. And that's yeah, it's just something that like we're aware of in terms of like the entire market structure as it is right now.
Makes sense. Makes sense. Also, I mean, the way sort of, first of all, like people in crypto are like very entitled in some ways. I think they'd buy like 80% bundled meme coins and then talk about like 15% VC holdings at the same time, even though VC like invested capital in the beginning, took all the risks. And I think that's kind of true, right? So I had a problem with reply guys as myself. I hired a few agencies, I hired a few people, and nothing was working out. So I then started my own thing, and built like a whole structure around it. So now we have a structure where we uh, you know get in a reply guy, right? If we take a test, then we have like an internal educational, like a tutorial, like a course for the reply guys, and we teach them, hey, this is how you reply, this is how it is, this is how you handle client and stuff. And then they work on my account, then they work on one of our other accounts, and then we hand them over to a client. So I have built this whole organizational sort of operational changes within the structure, which is not visible outside, right? So coming on to the question, uh, most of the times the product itself it can be good, it can be bad, but if the team's organization and everything is pretty decent, they'll win eventually. They'll either pivot or they'll make sure that that thing works. So at Eclipse, and especially you in marketing, like, is there anything, like any changes that you have made which is like which you feel that you everyone should know, and any organizational and operational things that you do that I think would make a difference in like everyone's business if they do. So, do you understand the question?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
So anything like that.
I think first things first, like is our sort of like team led marketing, right? Like a lot of companies have like this like one superstar Twitter person that just yaps about everything. We didn't really have the luxury of that because like no one in Eclipse was really big, really famous. Like no one has like at that time, you know, like no one had more than like 10K followers. Now we have like a lot more people that have like more than 10K followers after going to following. But at that time, like no one was a superstar. You know, like no one had a big enough existing audience that they could just yap about the same thing all day and like have a lot of mind share, right? So we were like, okay, like since that's not gonna work, why don't we just get the entire team to like yap on Twitter, right? So basically, the entire team since probably like I don't know 6 months ago, has just started talking about like Eclipse in their own way. You know, whether that's product, whether that's strategy, whether that's design, whether that's marketing or growth, and that's worked really, really well for us. I think we were the first protocols to sort of like innovate on this team-led marketing, like yapping strategy on Twitter. The second thing, I guess, marketing wise, probably not like that differentiated, but you just always need to think about like, you know, what is your positioning? What is your narrative? How can you really drive that home? Because you basically want to mean something to users, right? If you mean nothing, then you are nothing. And if you are nothing, then like, you know, like we all know like how that ends in general.
Correct.
Both
Correct.
for the startup and like the eventual token price. Another thing that I think we've tried to innovate on is like stunt marketing. You know, we've done stunts of like Turbo the Cow, our mascot. We did one in DEF CON last year. Like it was just like sick motorbike stunt. We produced like this really fancy like video on it. So that is something that I think we're relatively good at and we'll continue doubling down on. And also the mascot, right? I think at that point in time, there weren't that many mascots in crypto, and we were maybe one of the first like chains to really adopt like a mascot from like a chain perspective and put a lot of thought into like what the mascot should be, how we should drive our branding around it, and I think like it has worked out like pretty well for us in the grand scheme of things, right? So yeah, those are like a few things that I think that we've done differently on marketing, and like marketing changes so often. Like you just constantly have to be aware of like what's going on in the industry, what the competitive landscape is, how other people are positioning. It's like this like multi-dimensional chess game that you have to keep on playing, right? Because like obviously product is one component, but the other one is like awareness, mindshare, branding.
Right, right, right. I mean, it's good that you're thinking about like guerrilla marketing, like hype marketing, where you're like pulling off stunts. That's like I think that works a lot in general. And I have this crazy story. So I was, do you know Bitcoin puppets?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I was like a majority bag holder in Bitcoin puppets. So what I started
Didn't
doing
they
was
just raise 30 mil?
Bitcoin puppets. No, I don't know. What are you talking about? When?
Oh no, sorry, that's someone else. That's
No,
Udi and Wizards.
no. That's Udi. That's Urzi. That's
Yeah,
Urzi. Yeah,
sorry.
Taproot Wizards, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, Bitcoin puppets is like a degen things. I was like a majority
Yeah.
bag holder, so I started like buying hoardings in my city and just making hype videos around it. I was about to buy like a Times Square space at New York. Uh, so I am getting what I'm trying to say. So marketing is pretty chill like that. And about the team gapping strategy, I think a lot of people are not doing it because if like your team is not like your first advocate, it's pretty tough. It's pretty rough. And
Yeah.
we need the team. Also, I want to talk about like off X marketing. Like, do you target like LinkedIn, Instagram, things like that, or just Twitter for Eclipse? Because I understand most of the liquidity is on Twitter, right? Most of the
Yeah.
people who have money is on Twitter, but there are a lot of retail newbies as well. Do you plan to target them or no?
That's something that we think about, to be honest. Obviously like primary user base is still like Twitter, but social media, Instagram, TikTok is something that we are just starting to experiment with. And it's something that we want to experiment more, both from a chain perspective, which I think is one component. Like Pudgy Penguins does a fantastic job at this, right? Like their Instagram account, their TikTok account, their games in the game store. Like they do a really good job at this like non-crypto native like distribution and marketing. That's a fund that we want to like innovate on. But also at the app level, right? I think there's a lot of room for experimentation with a lot of these like consumer social fi gaming apps that do have a larger market outside of a very like crypto native audience, right? And that they should be like innovating on like TikTok and Instagram, like social media strategies. And I think there's some newer projects that are starting to do that. And I expect like a lot more projects to like catch on like soon.
Hmm. Makes sense. Makes sense. This is, I mean, I'm learning so many things from you. I mean, you are like one of the most, I'll be honest, right? Because you're one of the most learned people I've met. Because you have like a lot of understanding about a lot of things, man. And it's pretty, I mean, good stuff, right? And
Thank you.
I would want to talk to you again. I am not even lying, right? About a lot of things. Like I have a lot of questions about like in general where the space is headed. And I'm mostly a trader, so mostly like thoughts on that. I understand this is not a podcast that, because, but you were a trader, so I just wanted more opinions on a lot of other things. And how do you sort of maintain like a certain level of productivity in your life? So, for example, there are a few things I do. There is a technique called Vipassana. It's a meditation technique, right? It's like one of the oldest techniques
Yeah.
in the world. So I sort of do that every day. And there's this thing that I have a like a app that I use to count my hours daily on how much I'm working and uh, how much that is, because if you can't measure something you can't improve it. So
Yeah.
in terms of productivity, like what's the biggest hack or what's the biggest alpha that you can give us?
I would say like learn to aggressively say no. Almost to the point where like not rude, but like be very opinionated about like what you're trying to achieve, and then from there be very opinionated about what you're spending time on. Like I'm sure like most people in crypto, like there's 100 different things you could be doing. That's the same in a startup, like there's 100 different things that I could be doing at any given moment. I could be working on ecosystem, I could be reaching out to developers, I could do like marketing, I could be talking to like infrastructure partners. But like you have to be so opinionated and like saying no to like 80% of the things or like 90% of the things that come on your table is a really good way to like just drive the highest amount of impact possible. Like in general, if something doesn't drive an outsized impact, then like just say no to it. Like there's a lot of these things where like people want to hop on calls, people want to like have chats, and like I just say no half the time. Or I just go like, hey, like happy to chat async, this doesn't have to be a call. Or if it's a 30-minute call, I like mentally I'm like, okay, I'm gonna end this call within 10 minutes. We're gonna finish in 10 minutes. Like you can yap all you want. I'm gonna try to get this call done in 10 minutes. So yeah, like that's my productivity hack. Have a to-do list. That helps me a lot just because I forget like half of the things I need to do. So I literally just chuck everything I need to do, no matter how small, on a to-do list and get stuff out of the way as fast as possible. Like I'm sure a lot of people in crypto have this bad habit like me, like some Telegram chats you just leave there forever. And like it's there. Every day you check on it once and you're like, oh, maybe I should reply now. But like it's 1 week later, you've checked it like 7 times and you still haven't replied, and you're like, dude, what am I doing? Like all of that type of shit, like just reply straight away, get it out of the way. Beyond that, the normal stuff, less calls, less meetings, just focus and aggressively say no. That's my general productivity hack, I think.
Yeah. So like more maker time and less management time. From what I understand. Yeah.
Yeah. And also like there's a lot of these like random things that you could be doing. Like events are a great example of this. Like events take so much time to plan.
Yeah.
They're a huge time suck, but most of the time they're probably not as high like ROI as you think. So should you really be spending all of the time planning and throwing that event? Probably not.
Probably not. Just way too many meetings, way too many emails, way too many DMs. Just
yeah.
Makes sense. And also like, first of all, thank you, right? Because thank you for this, for the podcast, because I know how aggressively you value your time, and I'm really, really grateful, man. And also like one last thing, right? So it's not really a question. And I just like want to add further on to your statement, and that is like, before, like when I'm doing like 10 things, nothing works out because your focus is so thinned out. And the advice that you said right now, I wish I had this like 5 months ago, right? Because it's just like extremely makes you faster, right? Because when you say no to like 99 things, then you can just focus on the one thing that you truly want to excel at, and you just read about that and you just become good at it. You can't be good at everything. That's cap.
Yeah.
And I think that's one of the most valuable pieces of advice that you can give. It just shows me like how thoughtful you are onto these things, because a lot of people don't really think about that. And so thanks a lot, Ren. Any other last statements that you want to make to our audience here about crypto life in general, or anything you can say?
Yeah. First of all, thank you so much for having me on. I've had a great time. Second of all, like a lot of things I've said are like things that I've learned, right? It's not like I magically came into crypto on day one and like I knew about all of this. I probably did not say no often enough when I first joined Eclipse. Like that was something that was like learned as I like grew alongside and like spend more time like just like doing like startup stuff. So I would say if there's one thing in life, just like go enjoy what you do. I think most people in crypto enjoy what they do already, so like it's not that important. But there's also a lot of people out there that don't enjoy what they do, and it just sucks to see people spending their entire life like not doing something that they fundamentally enjoy. So like if you're young, if you're hungry, like just take more risks, dude. Like there's no reason to take more risk earlier on in your life. And it's just something that I very, very fundamentally believe in. Like people should just take more risks. Like not like go and leverage long like 100x right now, but like in terms of like life journey wise. But like other than that, my Twitter is purplepill3m. My DMs are always open if anyone ever wants to chat or anything. If you want to learn more about Eclipse, you can go to our Twitter, which is EclipseFND, or you can go to our website eclipse.xyz.
100%, guys. Go ahead and follow him, and make sure you fill his DMs so that take away some of his time, man, and fill his DMs with questions about Eclipse, what Eclipse is, and to be very honest, like if I was like X bullish on Eclipse, after talking to him, I'm like 5x bullish, just because like of the clarity that you have, man, like on what you want, what Eclipse is, and what it is not. Because a lot of times in the middle of the podcast, I was like, hey, I want to ask this question for this, and you answered it like without me even asking it, right? And I was like, okay, that question goes out of the water. Now what next? So thanks a lot, Ren. Thanks a lot for your time. Really lovely to talk to you, man, and thank you so much. Peace. And I'll be one of the
Alright,
biggest
thank
supporters
you.
of Eclipse for sure, for now. Let me bull post it.
Really appreciate that.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, guys. Bye. See ya.